Now, just because a guy has a great or fantastic performance in a big spot against a very good or great team, that doesn't automatically mean that they're going to be a great NFL player. We've seen that throughout the years, right? You can go way back to, what was it, Troy Edwards, Louisiana Tech against Nebraska many years ago. And you have like 21 catches for 405 yards, some crazy shit like that, whatever it was. Exactly. You're like, who? Exactly. So that shit happens all the time. And in the case of Jalin Hyatt, it would be very easy to look at that performance, that 5-touchdown game against Alabama, and say, that dude's a fucking star. Like, if he could do that against Alabama, imagine what he could do with the NFL. Yeah, let's calm the tits down just a little bit here, right? Because if you actually watch that game against Alabama, he did that against a number of just busted, broken down coverages, which was actually really surprising when you're talking about a Nick Saban team with Nick Saban defense with multiple, future NFL talents and high draft picks in that secondary. You say, how the fuck did that happen? But it did, right? Like, a couple of those TDs were just big throws on busted, blown coverages. But there are a couple of those touchdowns you look at and you say, yeah, those are the types of things you could see projecting to the NFL level. Not so much hey, I'm just going to be able to do whatever the fuck I want and run free downfield because the coverage got busted. But, the quickness, the speed, those traits that can translate. So, yeah, sometimes you got to be careful. Just because a guy had a huge game against a big-time opponent doesn't automatically mean they're going to be a great NFL player. Now, another thing, and it certainly feels like it holds true for Jalin Hyatt, is that sometimes you get so focused on wanting somebody to be well-rounded as a talent or prospect that you lose sight of, hey, maybe they're great in one area and bring one thing to the table, but they can do that really, really well, and maybe that's good enough, right? You look at Jalin Hyatt, and it's very fair to say that mostly his game is built off of quickness and speed. And there's not a whole lot else to it. And I don't necessarily disagree with that, right? Like, he is a guy where his game is certainly based off of quickness and speed. Now, I think he's got relatively soft, natural hands. He'll catch the ball away from his body. He'll meet the ball with his hands, which is good. Here's a guy that I saw put forth effort as a run blocker, effective-ish enough for his size, so when he's on the field, you don't automatically get tipped off that this is going to be a passing play. For the routes that he does run, his breaks are sudden and effective, but his route tree is very limited. It's like a lot of straight line type of routes, right? There's not a lot of, mixing it up. It's mostly straight line, like bam, bam, or in, cross, fly, post. You know what I mean? Very straight line-ish. But you get the ball in his hands. He's got good vision running after the catch. He can make some guys miss. He can certainly exploit open space due to his quickness and his speed. But his lateral agility, I will say, is average, so he'll make some miss, but he's not like going to overwhelm you, right? His catch radius could be better. He's not great, particularly at high pointing the ball. Doesn't break a ton of tackles in the open field. Struggles to get off a press due to a lack of strength, and his hand fight is really poor. Overall, his route tree, not very expansive, like I mentioned before. A lot of straight line-ish type of routes. Yeah, you look at Jalin Hyatt and you wonder, like, how does his game translate? And I've seen some people compare him to Deshaun Jackson, and honestly, who Jalin Hyatt reminded me of was a Will Fuller. Now, Will Fuller coming out of Notre Dame couldn't catch a fucking cold. But if he did catch the ball, it was a problem, right? Because of that quickness and speed. It was the one thing that Will Fuller could do. and you put him in an offense where you had a DeAndre Hopkins on the other side, and all of a sudden now you got a pretty nice 1-2 combination, right? You look at Jalin Hyatt and say, here's a guy, to me, similar to Will Fuller, that if you put him in a spot where he's not the featured guy, but he could be the number 2 next to a somewhat or pretty established number 1 guy, Jalin Hyatt could really cause some problems for opposing defenses because of that quickness, because of that speed, because of that playmaking ability. And he's the type of guy that you look at, especially once you start getting into the 20s or 30s range of the draft. These are the types of guys you should be swinging on. Yeah, the overall breadth of the game in terms of just how much they could do might be a little more limited than some other prospects. But Hyatt's quickness and speed is special. And that quickness and speed fucks at the NFL level. It kills, right? Speed kills kind of thing. Like, these are the types of guys you should be gambling on. These are the types of guys you should be taking a risk on. I'm not taking a risk on him high in the draft, like in the top half of round 1. That certainly feels too high. He's got, basically, like I said, one main skill, one attribute to his game. But that one skill attribute is special. It's that quickness, that speed. And you saw that against Alabama. Because not all 5 of those touchdowns came just against broken coverage, bad communication between the corners and safeties. Not all of them did. And when you watch him, get the ball in his hands and let him be on the move, get him to utilize his quickness and speed, and he can wreck some shit. Yeah, I'd love the thought if I was a team drafting in the 20s that said, hey, I need a guy that with speed, that could take the top off of the defense, that could make big plays happen. Somebody like the Chargers, the Giants, and so forth. This is the type of dude that they should be strongly, strongly considering. The Ravens, you say they signed OBJ, and I say, what about it? OBJ's last great season was fucking 2016, and he's on a 1-year deal. This could be a good opportunity or a good situation for Jalin Hyatt and whatever team drafts him, in terms of he'll be drafted somewhat high, but if he's drafted late in round 1 or early mid-round 2, you don't feel as much pressure that he's got to be a superstar, but he absolutely could come in and be an early contributor and make a difference for you, and you'll feel really good about the spot with which you took him.